Greetings, viewers new and returning. Hope you guys have all been doing well today. Today is another day of Virginia voyaging on the Norfolk Southern Railroad, this time on the Winston-Salem District, the absolute deadest of any line that runs to or from Roanoke, Virginia. For those of you who have watched my prior Virginia videos, you know that there are only two mainline trains that regularly run this line, Norfolk Southern 18W and 19W, with 19W presently running as NS 11E. Anything else is either locals that barely run up this whole line, or if you're fortunate, as needed bulk movements. And just my luck, today would have to be my fortunate day. Though I'd usually just be seeing dust bowls along these rails, today, right as I was leaving work, I noticed that there was a loaded coal train that was running through Roanoke, Virginia, that was preparing to take the Winston-Salem District. Now, as I mentioned before, I did a horrible job recording train IDs while I was up here, but I'm pretty sure this is Norfolk Southern 746 bringing coal loads from Shire Oaks, Pennsylvania to a power station in Bellows Creek, North Carolina. And so, having an uncommon opportunity to see a train on this line, I decided to make my way from Roanoke, Virginia to CP Starkey to catch 746 as it continues its push towards North Carolina. I had done a lot of scouting in this area, and there were a few shots I wanted in this line in particular. So right after the tail end left, I would begin pushing down the road that followed this line, and believe it or not, I actually overtook this coal train. When I had been driving through this area initially, I didn't even recognize the grade that the railroad actually takes through this area. And let me remind you, this train is a loaded coal train, a very lucrative but very heavy move on the railroad. So from where I had seen this train at Starkey, they had a long uphill climb that really slowed them down and gave me all the time to overtake them on this very scenic drive. In about 10 minutes after leaving CP Starkey, I would find myself next to this creek, standing under the midst of this bridge. This is a pretty simple bridge, I'm gonna be real. Just a few support structures, maybe 30, 40 feet in the air, and then the rails running on a platform over it. But it's honestly not something that I see too often in my home Georgia area. And it really goes to show the different terrain that lies in this region. This part of the country is very hilly, very mountainous, and there are a lot of water bodies. So plenty of the railroads that ran through this area either had to utilize the natural topography or adapt around it. And this line, which really tries to snake up this grade and utilize the land around it, ultimately would still require a bridge at some point in order to continue to its destinations, leading to bridges like these that have been here for God knows how long. All I do know is that it's old. Don't look too closely at that. Anyways, as I had mentioned before, NS 746 was crawling up this hill as it was working very hard to bring these coal loads over the grade. So even after overtaking the train, I would have to wait almost 10 minutes before a slow rumble turned into the loud howl of the prime mover and traction motors. wasn't trying to go too far up this line, but I definitely wanted to maximize as many spots as I could locally in this area. So once this train cleared this bridge, I would hit the road once again, and as you can tell, this time we're going downhill. And this would also mean that the train, which I overtook once again, would begin accelerating now that it had peaked the crest of the grade. So being unfamiliar to this area and trying to find something quick, I pulled up at the first feasible grade crossing that I could find. From looking on Google Maps, I could see that the next publicly accessible shot was kind of far away, and the shot didn't look all that special, so this would be the end of my chase for NS-746. However, my time trackside wouldn't end, because in driving through this area, I happened to notice some railroad artifacts sitting next to the main line.
What is that?
And thus, I found myself here, next to an old depot and a caboose that lies right next to the Winston-Salem District, and is actually just down the street from the crossing where I last filmed 746 at. Currently, we are in Boone's Mill, Virginia, and we have happened to come across the old Boone's Mill Depot, which formerly belonged to the Norfolk and Western Railway, which makes sense because this is an ex-Norfolk and Western Railway line, and that has a lot of local history for this area. Now, of course, seeing this building look very polished and recently renovated, it's no shocker in saying that this building did not always look like this. And not only that, it wasn't in this current location.
What?
Yep, believe it or not, this building was actually moved 500 yards to its current location from this spot, which lies relatively near to the crossing where I last caught 746 at. Now, in case you're confused on what the lore is here, the Boone's Mill Depot here was originally constructed in 1892 for the Roanoke and Southern Railway Company, which did not live very long and was soon completely assumed by the Norfolk and Western Railway. The depot was one of the first structures built in this city and essentially marked the beginning of the city commercially. The surrounding town grew from the railroad activity that was centered at this depot, and the building was used for passenger and freight service until passenger service closed in 1965, and eventually freight service was suspended in 1970, and the Norfolk and Western abandoned it altogether. As y'all know, the Norfolk and Western Railway eventually merged with the Southern Railway to form Norfolk Southern, soon to be bought out in 2027. Hopefully that last part does not happen. But anyways, if we look back at the Google Maps image, we can see that in addition to the depot being moved, the rail actually looks different. Norfolk Southern was doing some sort of track maintenance or restructuring back in 2014, and the depot was kind of in the way. Now, Norfolk Southern legit had nothing to do with this building, because up until this point, it had basically been abandoned for 45 years, and it was definitely showing the results of lack of maintenance. But Norfolk Southern actually offered the depot to the city on the condition that they move it. So believe it or not, this depot got loaded onto a massive truck bed and was slowly towed 500 yards from its original location to where it sits currently. Then some preservation group got involved, and over the years crowdsourced funding and donations to eventually restore it back to what it would have looked like in its heyday, thus giving us this clean and maintained presentation of a depot that's been around for over 100 years.
Sensation.
It now serves to tell the history of the railroad in this area, and is also the location of various events and other merchandise. And in addition to the depot here is Norfolk and Western caboose number 500829. This caboose, a unique C19 model, was built in 1940 for the Pittsburgh and West Virginia Railroad before that railroad was eventually leased by the Norfolk and Western Railway in 1964. And when the Norfolk and Western assumed this railroad, they also assumed the rolling stock and began rebranding them into their logos. And this caboose in particular is very unique because this logo and model combination is actually very rare.
What do you mean by that?
The Pittsburgh and West Virginia had all their cabooses in red, but when the Norfolk and Western bought it out, they repainted some of them in blue. And believe it or not, there was only one red and one blue caboose of this model and logo left anywhere in the world. We are looking at the red one, and you wouldn't believe where the blue one is. My local Southeastern Railway Museum. Couldn't believe it. What are the odds that I just happened to randomly be driving in some random town I hadn't visited in Virginia, and I would happen to come across the one caboose that is nearly identical to the one that I have in my local museum 20 minutes away from my house.
Incredible.
Of course, fortunately, the caboose that we have at the Southeastern Railway Museum has had a lot more exterior work done to it compared to the caboose that's before us right now. But hopefully one day, this red sister to the N&W caboose in my home area will get a new paint job and have some restoration to bring back its appearance in its glory days. Until then, It sits next to the Boone's Mill Depot, standing as a remembrance for the Norfolk and Western Railway that once ran this area long ago, giving way to the Norfolk Southern that I was working for and whose trains now run this area. And speaking of Norfolk Southern trains running this area, now that 746 was gone, as I mentioned before, there are only 2 trains that regularly run this line, but one of them in particular was the one that I almost always saw if I did happen to see a train on the Winston-Salem District, Norfolk Southern 19W. And now that 746 was gone, 19W, which had been waiting for that coal train to pass, had gotten clearance and soon passed me and the old Norfolk and Western memorabilia sitting next to the main line. With 19W gone, the rails were dead. Nothing else was going to run this line for the rest of the day. But there were some shots I noticed here that were not favorable in this lighting that I was hoping to get at an earlier time on another day. So 4 days later, on a weekend, I would find myself right back in Boone's Mill, Virginia, right next to the Boone's Mill Depot and the caboose, sitting next to the Norfolk Southern main line and next to an extended S-curve.
Nice.
The shot was completely backlit in the afternoon, but now that it was before noon, I sought to catch at least one train inbounding towards Roanoke, Virginia that would be navigating this curve. And of course, what other train than over-reliable Norfolk Southern 19W would be running these rails and give me the one train that would be running this line for basically the whole day. As you can imagine, a train carrying empty auto racks would be moving a lot faster than a loaded coal train, so I was not going to get nearly as many shots as I was able to with that 746. Fortunately, I was able to beat this train back to Starkey just before it arrived past the grade crossing here. With 19W almost being in Roanoke, Virginia, and preparing to soon stop, there was one more shot in the area that I wanted to get. As we've seen, the legacy of the Norfolk and Western Railway has not been forgotten in this area, and there was one more structure not too far from here that would really capture that legacy and give me a good close for this line. Well, my friends, there you have it, the Winston-Salem District. For those of you who do actually rail plan on this line, you guys know I really did not go far up this line. This line does not have enough traffic and not enough cool shots for me to drive out as far as I would need to see some more spots. And again though, this is still a very beautiful district, good area, good nature, a lot of old vintage structures, just gotta know when the trains are running. And fortunately, with my connections, I was able to have a good time on this line, even though it barely sees any trains. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time my friends, God bless, I will see you soon, out on the high iron.